Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. If you're a yoga practitioner or teacher who knows that there's more to yoga than poses, but you're wondering where to find that, come join our quiet little party. Here you'll find resources to help you deepen your practice, as well as insightful conversations with yoga, movement, and meditation teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. So we talk about all things gentle yoga, meditation, yin, restorative, yoga therapy, mindfulness, and more. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is going to be episode 32 of the podcast, and today I'm going to be introducing our next deeper dive theme because it's already almost May. So in May, we're going to be rounding out our study of the 4 Brahma Vihara heart qualities that we've been looking into all year, and this time we'll be diving into Mudita. Mudita is joy and gratitude. So it's a really beautiful energy to spend time with, and admittedly, sometimes it's a little complicated, especially in the midst of challenging times. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. This episode will kick off our deeper dive theme for May, and then next week I'll be sending out the worksheets for those of you who like to download or print them out for extra inspiration on our deeper dive themes. The worksheets will offer some interactive and creative ways to practice with the topic this month, so you really get to develop your own relationship with it in your practice. So that is free. You just have to be on my email list to get it, since that's how I send out the PDF. You can go onto my website at movedtomeditate.yoga to sign up and just look for any of the sign up boxes for the email newsletter, or look in the show notes or podcast description for a link that will take you there. And then I'm really excited, next week on the podcast, we'll have an interview episode that I think you'll really love. It's with my friend and colleague, Amanda Hanna. We talked last week and recorded about embodiment and trauma-informed considerations for embodiment practices, what embodiment even means, this wonderful buzzword that we have, and yin yoga, how she uses yin yoga in her embodiment practices, and lots more. So I'm really excited to share that one with you next. And one last announcement before we move into our topic officially for today. There is a special running at the Move to Meditate class library until May 6th. I'm offering a really good deal on a 6-month membership, and we don't usually offer a 6-month membership at all, so this is kind of special even in that sense. And I know some of you don't really love the idea of a monthly subscription payment, so that's part of the reason that I created this option for you. And with the class library, you get access to my online collection of mindful therapeutic yoga classes and meditations. There's 2 choices of level. One includes all of my live online classes along with the recorded library classes, and the other one doesn't. So pretty simple. If you've been listening to the podcast and just wanting to find some classes that align with what we talk about here, I encourage you to check out the Move to Meditate class library while this 6-month membership is available, which is only through May 6th. We're just doing it for this little while. All the info is at movedtomeditate.yoga/class library, or you can look again in the podcast description or show notes to find a link to that. Okay, enough announcements. Let's go ahead and talk about Mudita. So what is Mudita exactly? Mudita is a term that's the same in both Sanskrit and Pali, and it's sometimes translated as sympathetic joy, or altruistic joy, or appreciative joy. And it typically refers to the practice of being happy for someone else's good fortune or for their virtues. You can think of it as a practice of cultivating gladness or joy or celebration, celebrating alongside others. Some teachers, myself included, like to place gratitude practice also under this Mudita umbrella, because gratitude is when we turn that sense of joy and appreciation towards our own good fortunes, right? So it's including our appreciation of others' good fortune as well as our own joy and gratitude. And as I talk about this, I am particularly drawing from my studies in insight meditation from the Theravada Buddhist tradition. But as I've mentioned before, these same four heart qualities are also part of the yoga tradition. So I wanted to read you a Yoga Sutra, a verse from the Yoga Sutras. It's chapter 1, verse 33, which says, "By cultivating attitudes of friendliness toward happiness, compassion towards suffering, delight towards virtue, and equanimity towards vice, thoughts become purified and the obstacles to self-knowledge are lessened." That's the Mukunda Styles translation of that verse in the Yoga Sutras. And so you have the four heart qualities here. Maitri in Sanskrit, or metta, which we often call loving kindness, here is translated as friendliness. We also have compassion, which is karuna in both languages. Mudita, which here is translated as delight. And upekkha or upeksha, that's the Pali and the Sanskrit for equanimity. So by cultivating attitudes of friendliness towards happiness, compassion towards suffering, delight towards virtue, and equanimity towards vice, thoughts become purified and the obstacles to self-knowledge are lessened. So these qualities represent skillful ways of responding to life. Each Brahma Vihara, or that means divine abode, like wholesome resting place for our mind, each of them is something we deliberately cultivate. We work on it in our practice. And in time, they also can start to show up more spontaneously as a benefit or a gift of the practice. They kind of become more of how we are. And one of the reasons, though, that we need to make a practice out of something like joy, which sounds like a very natural human experience, and it is, but we need to make a practice out of it because of how our brains evolved. Neuroscience has revealed what's called the negativity bias, which was a trait that really helped humans survive for many eons by remembering dangers so that we would know not to repeat them. And it also helps us to stay out of harm's way and to focus on solving problems. Although I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I'm overly focused on solving problems. Got a little bit of a worry tendency over here. I don't know about you, but that's the negativity bias and one of the ways that it can show up. So the brain is actually really wired that way to store negative experiences quite immediately in our emotional memory, and it places a lot of emphasis upon them. As neuropsychologist Rick Hanson, who's also a meditation practitioner, describes it, he says, the brain is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. So like the negative experiences really stick like Velcro, and the positive ones can just like slide right off, slide right out of our brain, unfortunately. Rick Hanson has developed a practice of what he calls positive neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the ability of our brain to change and grow and adapt. And he calls this positive neuroplasticity. And it includes a practice called taking in the good. And you can read all about this in one of his books, which is called Hardwiring Happiness. I'll put some links to these in the show notes as well, so you can check for it there. But this process of taking in the good is a 4-step process that I'll describe briefly because I think it's really useful here as part of our mudita discussion. But it's like a process of deliberately internalizing a positive experience. So step 1 is to have a positive experience, and I would add recognize it as a positive experience. So you certainly want to practice this with the big deal things, like when something really great and awesome happens to you, and to not miss that or gloss over it. But also day to day, he really encourages you to practice with a very small positive moments. Like, for example, just the cuddly feel of your favorite blanket as you're sitting on the couch. That can be a positive that you can take in and wire into your brain and your nervous system so that you are moving away slowly, little bit by little bit, from that negativity bias. So that's step one, have and recognize a positive experience. Step two, when you recognize one, is to enrich it. And he says, this process, this part of enriching it is to stay with the experience for at least 5 to 10 seconds. And as you're doing that, you're staying with it, you're allowing it to grow in intensity and in detail. So you're really noticing what makes up this experience. What is this like? What's the feel of it? What's the taste, the flavor, the texture that gives it detail and gives it life and helps it to become a rich memory? The third step is to absorb it. So we want to bring it into our embodiment by really feeling the sensations of this experience, or perhaps by visualizing the good experience sinking into us and becoming part of our system. So really literally taking it in. And then the fourth step, this is really interesting, and you have to go into his work a little more to hear about how this is done, but it's to link the positive experience to some of your negative experiences in order to heal and rebalance those kinds of memories and to begin to really shift the dominance of that negativity bias. So pretty interesting, right? We need to do a process like this quite a bit because we are wired in a way where the bad experiences are given a lot more weight than the good ones. So we need to be really mindful. We need to be really mindful and receptive to all that's good. And what can happen is we start to recognize and realize that there's so much good around us, so many positives, so many small things to be grateful for that we probably just haven't really even been noticing. So that's a very contemporary method of working with positive states. Rick Hanson is influenced by insight meditation and mindfulness practice as well, and it's part of what he draws on in his neuroscience and psychology research, but it's still a pretty contemporary method that he's developed. And similar types of values and techniques and methods and practices have clearly been part of the Buddhist and yogic practices for a very, very long time. In Buddhist mindfulness meditation, one of the ways that mudita is practiced is with phrases, much like we've done with the metta and compassion meditations and equanimity meditations over these last few months in our deeper dives. So you choose a few phrases that help invoke that particular flavor of heart energy for you, and then you silently repeat them in your meditation. And sometimes you're directing them towards yourself, sometimes you're directing them towards others and different kinds of people and beings and different entities. So an example of some mudita phrases that I've heard, just simply saying, I'm happy, you're happy. I'm happy, you're happy. How's that for a meditation phrase? I'm happy, you're happy. You could even take a moment right now and just call to mind someone who's a friend, who's dear, someone that it's easy for you to wish well, and think of something good that's happened to them recently. Maybe they got a new pet. Maybe they got the Wordle in 2 yesterday. It doesn't have to be a big thing. And just say in your mind to them, I'm happy, you're happy. I'm happy, you're happy. So we share in their joy, we share in their happiness. Another phrase is, may your happiness continue, may it never wane. Maybe thinking of that same person, bringing them to mind and bringing forward that positive experience they had, that new sweater they found, or that delicious beverage they discovered at the coffee shop. May your happiness continue. May it never wane. May your happiness continue. May it never wane. And so some current favorite mudita phrases that I use, that I kind of came up with for myself, I like to say, I rejoice in your goodness, or I rejoice in your good fortune. So if it's something that's happened to someone, I might say, I rejoice in your good fortune. Sometimes it's just the fact that the person exists, and that makes me happy. So I might say, I rejoice in your goodness. I also do this in nature. Sometimes when I'm going on a walk, I'll do metta phrases or mudita phrases in my head as I'm walking, and send them to the people I see, or to the squirrels, to the trees. And if it's something like a natural object like a tree, I might say, I rejoice in your beauty, or I rejoice in your being. That one works for humans and trees. I rejoice in your being. So you can substitute goodness, beauty, your being, your good fortune, whatever is appropriate, that we're rejoicing along with. I also like to use a phrase that I learned from reading some of Thich Nhat Hanh's writings. He used it for walking meditation, but I think it makes a fantastic mudita phrase. To simply say, to take in something, maybe there's something good in your environment, something you can see, or something that happened today that's nice. And you just say, yes, yes, thank you, thank you. Yes, yes, thank you, thank you. That one has a rhythm like for walking meditation. So it works really good when you're doing a walk out in the park and you're just, happy about the sunshine and the flowers. Yes, yes, thank you, thank you. So those are a few ideas of words, of phrases that you could pull into your practice to use for mudita purposes. And let's talk a little bit about some of the things that might get in the way, or some of the questions that might come up with practicing joy and practicing gratitude. One of the things that often gets in the way is the comparing mind. Our tendency to compare ourselves to others and to kind of place ourselves either as doing better than or not as well as others. So when we see someone else get a big promotion, or get to travel somewhere exciting, or something works out for them that we want and it hasn't yet worked out for us, yeah, it can be difficult to feel that sense of celebration for them. We're only human. It's not easy. And we often go to that place of lack in ourselves, and we feel, the lack of what that thing is that they got. And then we often shoot a second arrow and start to judge ourselves for that feeling of jealousy, or not feeling, as good or as privileged or as fortunate or whatever as this other person that we're viewing. And of course, we can't force ourselves to feel joy for them, right? Don't try to force yourself to feel that joy, but perhaps reflect that their good fortune can remind you that such things are possible, and you're not exempt from that possibility. Sometimes it feels like it, but maybe their joy, their good fortune, that good thing that happened for them can be a reminder of possibility, and you can stay open to that possibility. And it can be a reminder to open to whatever opportunities for appreciation and celebration are around you, even the small ones that are already here. And I find that if I am more regularly doing a gratitude practice, in my experience, when I'm more in touch with that energy of gratitude and of noticing the good around me, and I'm more aware of those things that I really feel supported by, I feel a lot more space to be glad for others too. And I get less caught in that trap of comparison. So I just feel like more of the overflow of, I've got a lot of good going on here too, so I've got space to be happy for the good that you're getting. That said, gratitude is not a should. It is not a finger wagging at you saying you should feel grateful for what you have and stop complaining because some people in X town or X country or whatever are really suffering and blah. That just gets you stuck in the comparison trap, but in the other direction. So rather than positioning yourself as having less than someone, now you're positioning yourself as having more than someone and making a comparison. And rather than going there, gratitude practice really is meant to just be a genuine celebration and overflow of the beautiful aspects of your own life in this moment, your own life just as it is. And that said, it is absolutely a very valid question and a very useful inquiry to think about how are we holding these energies of joy and gratitude in the midst of a world that's filled with uncertainty and injustice and struggle and pain. I know often the question comes up that's basically like, is it even okay to feel joyful while others are suffering? Doesn't that make me kind of a bad person? So, okay, here's how I think about it. More and more, I think about all of these Brahma Vihara practices as exercises for having a flexible heart. If my heart is flexible, it can move this way or that way, depending on the present moment circumstances, depending on what's in my awareness at this moment. So sometimes the heart encounters suffering and it needs to respond, and it needs to respond with compassion. It needs to not turn away. Other times it encounters wonder and beauty, and we want it to be able to respond with mudita, with joy, with gratitude. And this could all be in the same day or the same 10 minutes even. So we need that flexibility to be able to move with what's in our awareness, to have that appropriate response. And remembering the good and remembering the positive possibilities, these actually give us hope. They resource us. They help keep us from getting hopeless and drained, and they help us stay strong in the face of challenges. If we're all burned out and cynical, what good are we? Right? So mudita can help us get through our own difficult times, still connected to some light, and it can help us regenerate our capacity to be there for others and to be a compassionate support in the world. So I don't think that suppressing our joy or our experiences of beauty when they occur is the right move, even though we recognize that, we're having this beautiful experience while others may be suffering. And to practice mudita is not meant to be that spiritual bypass thing of going into the good vibes only mode and trying to avoid or ignore anything that doesn't fit right into that joy or gratitude category. Because that way of seeing is not seeing the wholeness of what is. It's not seeing everything that's true. But I think it's also really easy to fall into the negative mind states where we can't see the good. We can't summon gratitude. Joy sounds like some kind of faraway, unattainable state. It becomes so distant, and this is also a distorted view. It's not seeing the wholeness of what is. When we're seeing clearly, we're seeing the wholeness of what is, we notice that the beautiful arises alongside the difficult, and both are true. It's like a rainbow arising out of stormy skies. Both are true. So mudita prepares us to not miss that rainbow. So I'll leave you with a Mary Oliver poem that I happened to run across this morning, and I thought this is perfect for the topic of mudita in a complicated world. So here's the poem. My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. Don't you love that? I do. Mary Oliver. So I'll leave it there for now on this topic of mudita. And I'll be sending out the 3-page deeper dive worksheets on Mudita in about a week in early May, so that's coming. And if the subject resonates with you, do be sure you're signed up for the newsletter so you'll get all of the upcoming resources on joy and gratitude this month, like the worksheets and guided meditations that'll come later. The link to that is going to be in the show notes, and there will be a sign-up form. Well, there's always sign-up forms you can find on my website. They're already there at movedtomeditate.yoga. And also, just to say, if you're listening to this later and it doesn't happen to be the same week that this is coming out, which is entirely possible, you probably missed the newsletter. But if you'd still like the worksheets, you can just email me at mail@movedtomeditate.com, and I'll be happy to add you to the list for future months and send you this Mudita worksheet now in the meantime. So that is our episode for today, and I thank you for listening to this reflection. I'm grateful for that. I'm taking that in. I'm enjoying that moment of knowing that you listened. And I do hope that you will look for some moments of joy and gratitude that you can really take in and celebrate today. So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend and/or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find us that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, live online classes, teacher trainings, and private lessons, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. Thanks so much for listening.